There's ability not to risk our lives unnecessarily, and we had wide latitudes about what might seem like necessity, but there was a general understanding. It is impossible to assume that there's a general understanding when as much as half of your community is brand new every year. Systems of general understanding work really well as long as there's a way to maintain the genetic code of culture in a gradual, transitory way. They do not work so well when you have a whole bunch of people that have to get educated in the system overnight and may not agree with the system as it was devised in the first place. May actually not be as wild, free, crazy, and willing to take unnecessary risks as you are. And so, there, you know, I've had a great deal of respect for the non-administration of Burning Man all along, and I continue to. But one of the things that I have seen increasingly develop here, and I think is a very interesting social problem, is that, you know, order has to somehow be maintained in this. I mean, to a certain extent. There are a lot of people vying for position in one form or another, and there have to be some systems that people agree on. Well, the problem is that if you have at the top of a system people who don't want to impose anything, what you will also have is this wild proliferation of crabgrass in the middle as former hall monitors finally get their moment in the sun, where they are completely unregulated by any existing set of standards or guidelines, and immediately start coming up with the most Byzantine kind of bureaucracy to regulate their particular version of anarchy. I mean, I have to say this, and I hope I insult nobody, but, you know, scratch an anarchist and find, you know, a frustrated control freak every time. This is true of me. But, you know, some people have thought about this problem less than I have. I encounter them commonly out here now. And there doesn't even seem to be the same useful old boy network that could get through that kind of, this new, very interesting form of bureaucracy, which is so fast growing and self-generative. You know, for example, I had an experience out at the gate the other night where there was one fella who was one of those guys who had set himself up in a very critical position as kind of a choke point on tens of thousands of people, and had come up with a very clumsy way of regulating this flow in terms of sorting out the vehicles that had to go to will call from the rest. So that every time somebody had to go to will call, the whole thing had to stop, and it took me 5 hours to get past this guy. I wasn't happy to see him when I got there, and I realized that it was just him doing this and doing it in this way. And you know, had it been most of the things that I'm familiar with, I would have known who to go to say, there is an asshole who is unfortunately inserted himself in an inappropriate position. Would you go out there and remove him? Well, there wasn't. What am I going to do? Come in here and say, Larry Harvey, there's an asshole at the gate? not that Larry even could do anything about it. Well, no, that's what I'm getting at. Okay, that's what I'm getting at. She says, if you can come up with a better system, why don't you? And I'm not saying that I have a better system, but I just want to state the problem very clearly so that people understand what I'm talking about. I mean, and I become part of the problem myself. I will freely confess. I mean, I had a very illuminating experience several years ago. We had an art car that we'd been bringing here for about 10 years. It was, you know, charming, shall I say, if not entirely artful, but effective, and certainly had managed to get through the DMV standards without a problem before. And suddenly we were dealing with a DMV person in Houston, Texas, who might as well have been working for the other DMV. I mean, in fact, wanted to be, I think. I mean, at one point she took particular umbrage at this, and this was part of the problem that developed. I wrote her an email and I said, look, why don't you just go to work for the real DMV where they'll at least pay you? And you'll have all the same satisfactions of punctiliousness that you're getting by being so over-regulatory with us. And then she got very cranky about it and said, well, you just can't come and nobody on your art car can come. And then I did appeal to various members of the Old Boy Network, and they got back to her and they said, well, I think you may be a little, you know, you're too easily insulted. You might come up with some solution here, please. So she came back and she said, all right, I've decided to let you guys through on the condition that you, John Perry Barlow, will have to work 2 full days at the Department of Mutant Vehicles, certifying mutant vehicles. I thought, well, this is an interesting challenge. This will be great. So I showed up, and I was willing to declare anything a mutant vehicle, practically. I mean, pedestrians were mutant vehicles as far as I was concerned. I hadn't made it through the morning before some guy showed up with the most pathetic, half-assed excuse for an art car I've ever seen. I mean, he barely put stickers on what was a relatively new pickup truck. And that was his art car. I said, no, it's not art car. It's not. And then I had the bit between my teeth, and by afternoon of that day, I was turning down some close calls. You see, I became that very asshole. And I freely confess this. I got so bad that the morning of the second day I was riding over to work at the Department of Mutant Vehicles, and I saw a pickup truck tooling across the playa, and I ran him down on my bicycle and found out that it was people from the Department of Public Works going out to take some stuff to the man. You know what it's like if you've just tried to bust somebody from the Department of Public Works. It's great-esque, but I'm 63 years old. You know, I really had to bust it. But I mean, the fact is that I was willing to bust it that hard. So I have a full understanding of the regulatory impulse, and I don't have a lot of easy answers to the question. But I think that the problem here, I mean, because this is not the physical, this is not the virtual world, where there is unlimited space in a sense, and there are unlimited resources in a sense. Here, even though the spaces are vast, they are constrained. And even though the resources seem inexplicably vast, they are highly constrained, very highly. And how we get along with each other when we don't know one another very well anymore, individually, under these circumstances, is difficult for me to ascertain, especially since, by virtue of our being in the physical world, we have to negotiate with all of those other systems of authority that are absolutely not dedicated to practical anarchy at all. Most notably, the sheriff's departments of the 2 counties that Burning Man has been in over the years, and the Bureau of Land Management, which realized some years back that a great way to fatten their budget, and to a bureaucrat, budget is everything. To a bureaucrat, budget is profit. And they realized that by going to the federal government, going to the mothership in D.C. and saying, we have this serious problem, there is an explosion of drug use that takes place every year, and we've got to do something to combat it. And the feds naturally poured it on and quadrupled the district office budget with law enforcement personnel, who you will see every time you turn around. I'm sure there are some here among us because they're not always in uniform. Hi, guys. We're going to change your funding. With any luck at all. And just parenthetically, let me tell you that this is, for any of you who are public-minded and know anything about the political system, if you want to keep the BLM back from Burning Man and want to try to dysregulate the regulation that is increasingly burdensome from the outside. Find out if any of your Congress people sit on the House or Senate Interior Committees, and then find out who the key staffers are in their office who deal with those committees, and then get to know those staffers, and then start explaining to them what the problem is, and they will fix it. I promise you. That is one solution to that answer. But the more immediate question is, how do we govern one another? Now, I rely a great deal on sort of the cult of leadership, you know, under these circumstances. But I think we've been thrusting a number of people in roles that they never asked for to begin with. If Larry Harvey wanted to be a leader, he wouldn't be an anarchist. And he is not particularly comfortable in being asked to make these kinds of decisions that people ought to be grown up enough to figure out for themselves. And nor is he in a position. He doesn't have regulatory authority over any of this. All the authority is something that arises from within. And so the reason I wanted to make this more of a conversation, and I will now shut up, is that I don't have ready solutions to this problem. I just want to tell you that I think it is a significant problem, and it is getting worse fairly rapidly. I mean, I encounter forms of bureaucracy here that remind me of the Soviet Union. And I don't know how to fix them at this point. But I know that we've got to get a lot more slack into this system, or the idea of anarchy at Burning Man will become even more ironic than it already is. So now I will turn it over. Where's the guy with the talking stick? There he is. I mean, anybody want to? I hope somebody will be pissed off enough to tell me why I'm.
One thing that started to concern people here was when it went from 8,000 to 12,000 to 15 to 25 was how to deal with the new 20, 30, 40, 50% of people that were new. And some people just, you know, you get to a city of 50,000 and you're just going to have some assholes, you know, some people that don't follow the rules. I was in a camp and this guy jumped the fence. I said, the fence needs a boundary, don't jump it. And he said, no limits. And I said, well, how about boundaries? He said, you want to try me? And if I had a gun, I would have said, okay, we're going to take you away, you know, I'm going to put you in the, we're going to re-educate you, you know, so I'm not sure. I mean, I wanted to say to him, I thought about later, you can take the boy out of the ghetto, but, you know, I mean, he was a Rastafarian, but whatever, but I don't know. That's the problem.
No, I don't.
People come out and say, no limits means I can be a schmuck and I don't have to obey the basic principles of be nice, don't steal somebody's bike, and don't walk through the middle of somebody's camp. And
it becomes increasingly difficult when, you know, your founding culture was assholes. I mean, we were, you know, kind of proud of it. You know, our whole attitude towards somebody having a problem was fuck them. Well, that's a grand attitude under certain circumstances, but when you got you can't just, you know, however available they may look for it, you can't fuck 50,000 people. You can't just do that. I do have, you know, one of the things that I can bring to bear on this, and I wrote songs for the Grateful Dead for a good many years, and was kind of, I dealt with a lot of the social issues that arose as we turned unwillingly into a religious cult. And these were actually relatively easily managed because everybody was kind of, as I say, in on the joke up to about 1967 when we made the mistake of accidentally putting out a hit record. And the audience quintupled overnight. You know, suddenly everybody was new, and nobody was in on the joke. And I went out, I had meetings with deadheads around the country where we tried to figure out ways to create cells that would go out and gently try to educate the newcomers on how to, you know, how we had to behave under those circumstances not as rules, but, you know, extremely advisable standards of conduct. And this, well, I mean, we were dealing with hippies, which makes it a little easier. But, you know, I think this is something that is worth considering here, as long as you don't get the same hall monitors going out and spreading your culture. Yeah.
So I think I know the person that was doing the separating. He was a ranger on Monday, and they stuck him out there. He's a junior ranger, which means that you know, you don't say fuck you. I mean, you go do that. I want to go around and be a ranger. And 6 hours he was out there without relief. So okay.
No, and I got that. I mean, you know, I had walked up to the front and seen him from a distance for a while. I mean, he was, I mean, and, you know, and I came up to try to talk to him, and I was going to try to get him relief. He said, you know, he said he didn't.
So that's
his at that moment, his problem was me asking him if I could help him.
Of course. So I have tried to deal with the BM org for years on suggestions and things like that. Good luck. We have decided to go local, which means that our village and our camp is where we can do our education.
That's right. I mean, I think that's, you know, there's no there. You know, you can't, like I say, if you ask yourself, where's Dad, you find out you're a bastard. And right away around here. And that's a very difficult thing for a lot of people to grapple with. Yeah, you had a, right there. Yeah, you. Oh, okay, gotcha.
I hope you will excuse my strong accent. And I go back 2 seconds to what you said about...
I can excuse almost anything.
Perfect. Now, it might be difficult to understand. Not only for the accents. Can I go back 2 seconds to what you said about the Arab revolutions going on, anarchy and so on? I'm wondering if what is happening not only in the Arab countries but also in Europe, like Spain, Greece, okay? Yep. Is it, especially the youth, because it's not like some governments trying to change, that will never happen, but, and also there, you see no leader, there is no actual leader. So what I'm thinking, is that anarchy, or can we call it maybe common sense, coming back?
Well, I think it is common sense. But you know, the problem with governance is always, how do you turn common sense into something that everybody agrees is common sense?
Sorry, no, what I meant is, we just came to Burning Man. This is our first Burning Man. Okay, so I cannot actually say what it was before it, what it could be tomorrow. I think your question was anarchy and Burning Man. I think, as far as understood, all the people here, at least 99.9% of the people, especially the ones who came since maybe the beginning, I don't know, came here to look for a common sense. Something that made them live well together.
A common sense.
Exactly.
Yes,
maybe
exactly.
Out of the laws.
Right.
Some laws that have been written by a few for most of the other people.
Yeah.
But anarchy or common sense, I actually prefer to call it common sense. Something that, you know, I believe in what an old saying that says, my liberty ends when the others starts. And
Absolutely.
That's it. We don't... Anarchy, I think it's actually very difficult to put in place.
Yes.
Just, you know, living nicely, self-regulation, I think that would be actually better, personally.
You know, and you know, as a longer term, I actually have this completely utopian notion of what digital communications will do someday, where it will give us the opportunity to govern from the bottom, and govern by the evolution of a common sense. I mean, I believe that wholeheartedly. I don't expect to live to see it, but I think that day can come if the human race survives.
Thank you. Let's say someone has the ear of somebody from the old boys, or say someone has the ear of a lot of old boys. How would or should...
They aren't old boys, by the way, but
the plutocrats, the top 2%, those people. Let's say somebody oftentimes has the ear of many of these sort of people. What can one do to try to educate them to not fuck stuff up?
Well, you know, around here, it's one question. In the large, if you're talking about plutocracy, I mean, if you're talking about conditions as they exist in the United States.
Well, I think it's not just, you know, it's anywhere. I mean, what you're saying about the old boys network, it's not just a problem here. It's a problem with any sort of culture or system where you have a lot of people that need to be organized to do things.
Well, I think, you know, there are distinctions to be drawn too between old boy networks that are dedicated to a common understanding for the betterment of the whole. I mean, that was the wonderful thing about the Internet Engineering Task Force, was that they had absolutely no power or money ambitions. There was no money in it at all. And old boy networks such as have developed in the matrix of Wall Street, Washington, and you know, Greenwich, Connecticut. That old boy network has a very specific set of goals, and you can be. I mean, look. Among my many sins was that I was one of Dick Cheney's campaign managers when he first ran for Congress. So I know a lot about how to communicate with people in that network. I mean, I wouldn't do that today, but I didn't know how bad he was then. He hadn't had a chance to prove it. But you know, the problem is you can have that ear, and I do all the time, and they don't really feel differently about things than I do, except for the fact that they have a system that is now self-generative and is spinning in a stuck positive feedback loop to gather all of the resources to itself. I mean, what the American plutocracy is a cancer. It is a cancer, and it has